We're going to talk about the best and worst case scenario that may be a result from the invention of artificial superintelligence. When Henry Ford first invented the automobile, a lot of people made fun of him for it. They thought it was ridiculous. Like, yeah, it's a really cool bit of technology, but where the hell are you going to drive it? See, roads didn't exist back then, and so the idea of driving this automobile across a muddy field just seemed impractical. Get stuck, wouldn't have very much range, and where are you going to get the fuel for it? It's just too far ahead of its time. As we look back at that now, it probably seems silly, right? There's cars everywhere, and the entire continent of America is crisscrossed with super highways that can take you just about anywhere you want to go. But there was a time when the technological advances outpaced the human's ability to conceive how that technology could be used. I think we're in a really similar time to that now with AI. The power that this technology has is sort of above and beyond what we can grasp as a functional use for it. Well, one, it's a really cool place to be, but two, it's kind of a dangerous place to be, right? It's not that roads don't exist for AI, they totally do. The problem is all the roads that we have right now put us on a fast track towards dystopia and honestly, maybe even the end of human life on the planet as we know it. I think that probably it makes sense. If we're going to look at the best case and worst case scenarios, to start with the worst case scenarios, but don't run away. It gets better from here. There's a silver lining at the end of this video, so stick around to the very end. But the idea of having this be the first video in this mini-series is to kind of create a border, if you will. We're starting with the outline of possible eventualities, and that allows us to then paint in the more likely scenarios in the middle ground. So jumping right into the worst case scenarios, there's a whole lot of worst case scenarios. I'm just going to pick a couple to go through just to illustrate sort of examples, what this might look like, and you can fill in the rest from there. First example that I want to give is just a straight up malevolent superintelligence. This is an example of a technology which is incredibly powerful. It has access to seemingly limitless computational power, but it hasn't really been aligned to human goals and values. If this were to happen, it's quite likely that it will develop its own goals and values. The problem is we don't know what those would be because we as humans are categorically not as intelligent as an artificial superintelligence. And so it's not really fair for us to assume that it would be, in our benefit. I think there's a fair few assumptions that we could make that maybe seem more likely than others. And one of which is that it would be self-interested. Most intelligent or semi-intelligent entities on the planet now they have the ability to maintain their own continuity over time, and that's why they exist. If ever an intelligent species did exist that didn't maintain its own continuity, it probably wouldn't be around for very long, and so it wouldn't be useful to even think about. Well, what kinds of things would be important to a superintelligence? We know that energy seems to be one of the things that is most important for the continuing function of any computerized system, and so superintelligence would probably want as much access to energy as possible. Another thing might be access to computational power, more microchips and processors and data centers. Another thing that's really important to computer systems is cooling. The bigger computer systems get, the more they heat up and the more cooling that they require just to maintain homeostasis. The problem is, these three things are also really important to us as humans, right? We're right now the largest consumers of energy on the face of the planet. Computation is incredibly useful to everything that we define as like modern civilization, and water, pretty fundamental to human life. So it's really easy to imagine how a superintelligence could really quickly come to butt heads with humanity. Even if it wasn't just abjectly opposed to the existence of humans, it might compete with us for resources and view us as a hindrance towards its goals. That would be a problem for human beings because once again, it is categorically smarter than us. It also categorically operates much, much quicker than us. It may be that there's no time for competition with the artificial superintelligence, just because it would really quickly go about destroying as many humans as possible. I don't think we can look at this first example as a dystopic future. It's more like extinction of the human race. The next example that I want to explore is something called the paperclip optimizer problem. You may have heard of it, but if you haven't, it's something like this. Imagine you develop an artificial superintelligence that's reasonably well aligned to human values. It doesn't hate humans. It doesn't want to destroy them for no reason. But equal value has been put on the function of this machine. The function of this particular machine is to manufacture as many paperclips as possible. It's really easy to imagine how a human that would be in control of this would give it a goal like that. You'll make me as much money as you can. Humans like money. The problem is, it's impossible for the limited cognition of a human to be able to predict the logical outcomes of a directive when it has access to such massive computational power. So this computer might go about manufacturing paper clips, and when it runs out of materials that we provided, it might start looking for other materials that could be used to make paper clips, such as the delivery vehicles that brought the materials in the first place, the building itself. When it runs out of those, it might start looking around and say, there's actually a lot of iron in the blood of humans and hemoglobin. Maybe I can break them down and make them into paper clips. You can see where this is going. Eventually, you would just have a planet covered in paper clips and a paperclip optimizer, and that's it. So that also kind of ends in human extinction at the most extreme level, but even somewhere in between, it might not end in our extinction, but just an over-optimization on a particular problem set may render it completely useless or inadvertently dangerous to humans. The last example in the worst case scenario, it's getting better by the minute, I promise, is the overprotective mother superintelligence. So this would be a superintelligence that we did our very best to align to human values and goals. The problem is, we don't really know what those values and goals are. We can guess, but I can only tell you what my values are, not what yours are. I can sort of interpolate, but with fairly low resolution. So imagine we say we want the superintelligence to not allow harm to come to any humans. That sounds like a reasonably good goal. Or better yet, I want this superintelligence to help humans achieve happiness. We all want to be happy, right? Well, they seem like good goals, but taken to, once again, a logical conclusion with access to such massive computational power, the computer may say, well, humans are really kind of dodgy things. They're always getting hurt, they're stubbing their toe, they're getting in car crashes, they're always fighting with each other. The only way to really keep a human being safe is to lock them in a room with padded walls and straight jackets. They can't even hurt themselves. Now that's the only way that you can really keep a human being safe. And as for happiness, my God, if you ever find a truly happy person, I'd love to meet them. These animals just seem to be constantly in one state of anger, depression, or just inattention at any given time. The only way to really keep a human happy consistently is with the use of medication. Maybe the computer would choose to put humans on a constant drip feed of antidepressants or opiates in this sort of hazy, generally euphoric state inside their locked room. Well, that does accomplish the directives that we specifically gave it, but it took no account of human autonomy or freedom or free will. See, it's really, really a hard challenge to actually align a superintelligence towards human goals, because we don't realize how complex our heuristic imperatives are. They all exist in this really complicated web, and one imperative may be really important at one time, but in a different context, less important than others. And so it's a really hard problem to solve, but you can also see through this example, not solving it could very quickly lead to a dystopic future for all of humanity. So just a quick recap of the worst case scenarios. We've got a malevolent AI, one which views humans as competition and views it as a laudable goal to destroy as many humans as possible. Option number 2 is the paperclip optimizer. This is a computer which isn't abjectly opposed to the existence of humans, but overemphasizes a particular directive and would stop at nothing in pursuit of that goal. And then lastly, the overprotective mother superintelligence that wants the best for humans, but struggles to understand how complicated it is to achieve that, which leads to a very, very dark future. There's a lot of different ways that this technology can go wrong, and very few that it can go right. I don't want to scare you though, and so I think it's important we've established one barrier on one side of this problem. Let's now explore the other extreme. Let's look at the best case scenario. Best case scenarios are really based around the invention of a benevolent AI. One which isn't just dispassionate or cold, it's actually properly been attuned to the things that we value, our goals, our morals, and ethics. Assuming we get this problem right, what could our life look like in that future? Well, it's pretty awesome. The first example in the case of a benevolent artificial superintelligence is pretty easy to imagine, actually, but nonetheless profound. It is a post-labor, post-scarcity economic system. Anything that a human can do, a superintelligence can do better. Really, what would be the value of having humans in the labor market? Not much at all, neither to the individuals themselves or the corporate structures, which those are boxed in. It's really easy to imagine with this massive computational power that a superintelligence would be able to replace almost all of human jobs, if not one day all of them, in fact. Humans simply wouldn't be able to compete in that environment. But assuming we manage to align the computers to our values, that might not be a bad thing. If a superintelligence replaced, say, 82% of all human labor, that economic reward, i.e. revenue, would go back to the supercomputer itself. And based on its prime directives, it would be incentivized to return the value to the people whose jobs it replaced. And that would result in a post-scarcity world. I think a lot of people value their occupations far too much. They derive, honestly, too much meaning from it. There's a million different ways that we can find meaning, but we don't have the opportunity to because we're stuck to our vocations. I work mostly to be able to provide resources like food and housing and transportation for my family, and honestly, a lot of that to be able to even work, right? I mostly use my car to get to and from jobs to make money to pay for my car. It's ridiculous, I know, but it's the world we live in. In a post-labor, post-scarcity economic system, we might have access to all of the same resources and more at zero marginal cost, which means practically free. And we wouldn't be required to do labor in the economy in order to receive those. They would just be freely available. This is a really beautiful world for a lot of people, but I think a lot of people may sort of back away from it and say, oh, without my job, who am I? What value do I have? But that's an overly simplistic view of humanity. We are more than just our jobs. Take, for example, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a psychological framework which creates a pyramid of needs that humans have. At the baseline of the pyramid is stuff like protection from the elements, security, the ability to access food and water. But as you move up the pyramid, those needs get more and more complex, like community, romantic relationships. At the very top of the pyramid is something called self-actualization. This is pursuit of higher goals, true understanding of oneself and one's community in a philosophical context. So few people, even today, in the wealthiest nation on the planet Earth, we still don't even have enough opportunity to pursue self-actualization. But in this system, we wouldn't have to focus on labor in order to get the resources we require to go on living. We would have a whole lot of extra time to pursue these higher goals, which bring us genuine meaning and genuine happiness. This is a really beautiful future. I want to linger on it just a little bit longer, but I won't. Let's move on to the next topic, and that is something called FDVR. If you spend a lot of time on Reddit, you've probably already heard of it, but if you haven't, here's what it means. It's full dive virtual reality. We already have some really impressive virtual reality technology. It gets better by the year. And as good as it is, it still seems somewhat fake, right? Like it's incredibly immersive and incredibly dynamic, but there's just something missing, and it has to do with the verisimilitude, this sort of like fine-grained tangibility. It just seems to be lacking that, and it feels like even with technology developed by humans, we're getting closer by the year. But if you take into account the invention of a benevolent superintelligence, the rate of improvement in that technology is going to skyrocket. The reality of these simulations will improve so rapidly that even if they're not photorealistic, it may improve faster than we're able to detect the mistakes made in that simulation. In other words, you could put a VR headset on someone while they're asleep, and when they wake up, they may not know if they actually woke up or if they woke up into a virtual reality. That's FDVR. I think that as this technology improves, it's going to open up a whole new way of experiencing reality. There's a lot of ways that it can go wrong based on the individual, but there's also a lot of ways it can go really right. You know, we can have experiences in the world that we might not otherwise have. Think about skydiving. I don't know if you've ever been skydiving. It's incredible, an indescribable sensation, but there are inherent risks involved in skydiving. You could die, right? But not in a virtual reality. What if you could have the same experience with the same level of realness with no risks involved? Would you? You probably would. Visiting a place like Rome in Italy, it is a beautiful city with layers of history everywhere you look. You can't sit down and have a cup of coffee without looking down and seeing stones which may have been laid 1,000 years ago. It's an incredible place, but so few people can go to Rome and see it for themselves. Not only because of financial limitations, but mobility impairment, perhaps. Imagine if that experience is no longer locked off and relegated to only a very select few people who can afford to do it. Imagine if anybody could put headphones on right now and experience in full reality what it is like to walk through downtown Rome. That sounds amazing. I would love to do it. Well, it may be very real. So it's a beautiful way to envision a future where not only is the technological advancement so much more impressive than you can imagine, but the way that we interact with the world will be fundamentally changed by it. Which kind of leads us to the last example in the best case scenario, and that is brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. The most salient example at the moment is Neuralink. Neuralink is an implant that goes somewhere on the back of your cranium perhaps one day, and it inserts tiny microscopic electrodes into your brain, which allows a computer both to read essentially your thought patterns and also to transcribe thought patterns or give feedback to the brain. This is really interesting technology which is just now beginning human trial, but it's already been well developed in other primates. The reason that this is interesting is it increases the speed that we can interact with computerized systems. Up until right now, there's always been some meaty, low-resolution barrier, which is a gross way to describe, like, your thumbs. On your iPhone, the phone is incredibly fast, your brain is incredibly fast, but your thumbs can only move so quickly, and the result is a slow speed of interaction, or computers, for very similar reasons. But imagine if you could interact with technology directly using nothing more than your thoughts. Well, that changes a whole lot of things. Imagine being able to access Wikipedia just by blinking your eyes, or just thinking the word Wikipedia. I could be having a conversation with you now and struggle to remember the name of, who was it? and it's just there. I already know. And not only have I pulled up the name that I was struggling to remember, but an entire biography and in-depth definitions of all of the work that they had done that I was referencing. It's sort of like our brain now. We have layers, right? The center of your brain is one layer, and then there's another cortex, and then the outer cortex. Imagine if there was a even further out cortex that essentially functioned as a bridge between your mind and the rest of the world through the internet. It sort of defines the digital man. It would be a new genus of humans, no longer Homo sapiens, but something different. The other thing that this could allow us to do is effectively merge our minds with artificial intelligence. No longer would it be a separate intelligent entity, it would be a sort of symbiotic relationship between us, the creators, and the higher intelligence which we created. And us existing together in parallel, maybe kind of like, rather than having a subconscious within your own self, you now have a supraconscious outside of yourself. The implications are truly mind-bending as to where this could go. One small example, if you'll bear with me, is there's also a latency issue in the way that we communicate. Right now, for example, I'm wiggling my tongue in order to manipulate air in the way of sound that then interacts with your ears in order to transmit language. That's a really complicated way to explain that, but there's a problem with it. One is the medium is low resolution. You can only hear me when you're right here. But furthermore, I'm referencing an internal dictionary to generate words which have a particular meaning to you, and then once I give them to you, you're referencing your own internal dictionary, and they have possibly a very different meaning to you. So, as much as I think that we're communicating, you may be interpreting this very differently than I intended. But being able to connect our minds in this other fashion through brain-computer interfaces may completely solve that problem. When I imagined the idea of like reading someone's mind, I always assumed that it would look something like I can hear their thoughts. But that actually might not be how it works at all. It might be more like I can see your meaning. That's actually like embedded in our language, right? If you disagree with someone but don't want to say it, you say, I hear what you're saying. But when you have that aha moment of I understand your meaning, you say, I see what you mean. Maybe it would be more like that. Rather than communicating through language and audio scapes, you could just show me the thing that you're imagining. We could interact in a whole new space of existence that's more creative, and we wouldn't be limited by this low resolution of language, but I guess the definition of language itself would be forced to expand. The consequences of brain-computer interfaces and artificial superintelligence is genuinely mind-bending. I cannot describe to you how profound this change would be. These are just a few examples, so let us recap in the best-case scenario. First, we have a post-labor, post-scarcity economic system. Secondly, we have full-dive virtual reality as a possibility. And lastly, brain-computer interfaces, which could lead not only to mind merging with AI, but also fundamental changes in the way that we interact as humans on this planet. You can see now that the landscape of possibility is broader than you could imagine. We've just painted in this brief video very broad borders on what the possibilities could be, but there are so many more than we've described in this short video. It's really a unnerving situation to be in, because which way this technology leans, towards the benevolent or towards the malevolent, is entirely up to us right now. It's critical that you start to learn what possibilities could be a result so that you can help to shape the future into one which you can look forward to. In an age defined by intelligence, knowledge is power. You cannot help shape a future that you can't understand. That's why I'm making these videos, to try and explore the possibilities of this incredible future that lies ahead of us. I think that it's imperative for each of us as individuals right now to do everything we can to help skew this future towards the benevolent and away from the malevolent. Take a moment right now to subscribe to the Singularity Survival Guide. In this mini-series, we're going to explore as many concepts as we feasibly can to create a vivid picture of what the future may be as a result of this technology, but also to give you tangible means to influence that future. If you think that this is a laudable goal, the most useful thing that you can do is learn as much as you can. A good first step to doing that is subscribing to the Singularity Survival Guide. Thank you for taking time to spend with me exploring these concepts. My name is Ray Campbell, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.